Hey everyone, we're live. Welcome back to the 2022 Scholars LinkedIn Live series. I'm Parker, one of the founders of Scholars, and we're going to be covering throughout this year, every week, everything related to early career candidate experience, engagement, the landscape of early career recruiting, and just overall industry insights and data that we're collecting and learning from our fellow peers in the early career industry. Obviously, for this episode, what we're going to be covering is how virtual recruiting has changed early career hiring in its kind of holistic nature. And it's no surprise what virtual recruiting has made teams adapt to as it relates to their early career hiring processes. But taking it a step further and really thinking about what has virtual recruiting shown us from the candidate's mentality is really where I want to drive this conversation. And one of the first things I want to talk about is how this landscape has shown us the demand that students have, that they really require companies to offer remote recruiting events in some capacity. The days of recruiting on campus solely, I think, are over. I think we can all agree with that. That's no surprise here. And we know that some teams are obviously have a hybrid recruiting model. They're going on campus and doing virtual events. But when we think about the remote event space of our kind of sourcing strategy for early career recruiting, what are our goals for those events in conjunction with our goals of recruiting on campus? And how are they ultimately driving to the same experience and delivering the same experience to candidates on a one-to-one basis? I think that the goal of a remote recruiting event shouldn't be to draw a mass audience. I think if you're drawing a mass audience, it can preempt our events to not drive as much engagement from candidates, whether it's from questions or feedback. And ultimately, what we want is to deliver that same experience if we were on campus in a remote event and meeting someone and able to answer their questions on a one-to-one basis. I think that a smaller scale virtual event will go a lot farther from your company standpoint of obviously getting and driving the candidate to apply to your roles, but also from the candidate standpoint to show them that you tailored this experience in this event to ensure that they can ask any questions that they have and make sure to get the most out of that event. Now, some tips for types of virtual events that we hear work really well. One is kind of, I would say, not coding camps, but almost from a technical perspective, technical development classes. So bringing in someone from our engineering team to teach a skill or to cover a topic and loop it into how it relates to your company's product, software, or solution that you're offering. This will give the candidate a glimpse as to how that specific skill that is being covered or talked about ultimately relates obviously to your company, one, but two, what they could expect to utilize if they do apply and get an internship or an entry-level job with your company. Second, I would say like mental health and wellness events as well, talking about how your company values employee well-being, as well as how that employee well-being translates to early career hires as well, because that can be something that is overlooked. Is we're offering the well-being and mental health training and resources for our full-time employees, but what about interns, and how do interns or students coming in kind of translate into what the full company is able to experience as a full-time employee? I would say for these events, 10 to 20 people max will allow a team of 2 to 4 to ensure that they can deliver the best experience possible for these candidates. I think the second thing that's changed is we have had to rethink what students want in a remote recruiting environment. I think the one thing that they really want is the ability to have work flexibility options, not just saying everyone's remote or everyone's in person, but offering a hybrid approach to allow candidates to make that decision for themselves based on their circumstances and based on how they know that they learn, as well as their life standpoint and their ability to make that decision for themselves. I think another thing that students really want in this remote environment is for the company to help facilitate connections between interns or candidates that are in the same cohort. It can be challenging sometimes if you're just thrown into like a general like GroupMe or Facebook group with 50, 100 people and that's it. But how is our recruiting team or our team helping facilitate everything from coffee chats to small breakout sessions, just like having general icebreakers or helping students kind of break that icebreaker and break that barrier to start to form those friendships and those relationships. Because ultimately our goal is, hey, these students are coming in and interning with us. Obviously, hopefully they're converting, and these are the people that they're working with in 5, 10 years down the line. I think another thing that we see students really wanting is weekly communication from the first time that they interact with your brand all the way through the end of their internship. Now, what that communication can be, that's a whole nother episode that we'll be getting into about how we can actually personalize weekly communication with candidates. But the goal is let's ensure that they feel as informed and updated as possible, obviously, and they know everything that they need to know to make the best decision for themselves. Ultimately, our goal is, hey, let's make sure that that decision is coming to work for our company, but putting it in the hands of the candidate and truly making sure that they understand that from the get-go. Another thing, emphasis on employer brand that actually speaks to early career candidates. Obviously, a lot of teams who have early career programs have a team that is focused on employer brand in some capacity. But how are we translating that more general employer brand, employer value proposition that is drawing our later stage hires, and translating it to what this generation is caring about when it comes to evaluating employers? I think a few ideas that I have is ensuring that your brand speaks towards career growth, commitment, and mobility for interns or entry-level employees, which is something really big. I think secondly, it's showcasing what life working remotely or in a hybrid model could actually be like for the role that they're coming into. How are we taking a story of someone working at our company and showcasing how a remote or hybrid work model that they are a part of is actually helping them be more productive, maintain a work-life balance, and truly ensure that they are being the best employee possible for themselves. I think another thing that we've lost is the education about the industry that our company is in. So it's not just, hey, here's our company, here's how big we are and how much money we've raised from a funding perspective. But it's, hey, look, here's our company and here is why we are a leader in the space and we are driving innovation in this specific space. Because if we can get candidates excited about where our company is going and how their work relates to the broader goals of the company set forth by our leaders, that is going to show them ultimately how their impact is going to translate to the company succeeding down the line as well. And I guess lastly is thinking about our brand from the standpoint of the student's day-to-day life. How are we conveying that working at our company is going to set them up to be able to manage personal and professional life post-graduation? Everything from managing financials, which sounds like something very easy, to managing a family, to managing a career, things like that, that you may not think a sophomore or junior in college is thinking about, but I promise you this generation of students, they are thinking about it. And I guess from the last perspective that I really want to cover is the virtual recruiting environment it's changed completely how we think about early career candidate experience. We are required to make candidates feel like we're communicating to them one-to-one from someone that is at the company and not a general email that is tailored ultimately to what they're looking to get out of the opportunity. I think we've had to redefine how we think about the experience from the time someone signs an offer until they start on day one, and not just having a quote unquote keep warm strategy, but tailoring that keep warm strategy based on the personas of candidates that we're ultimately coming into. I think that building community as a part of that keep warm strategy is extremely key. And that community has to be managed to be successful. We can't just set up a group and throw a bunch of names in there of interns and hope that they're going to start talking to each other without some sort of facilitation or guidance in terms of how they should best utilize this group to ensure that they are forming friendships and getting ready to join on their first day. You can provide them with like a social events calendar for the upcoming summer. I always recommend pairing them up for coffee chats or happy hours if they're of age. Outlining communication expectations before their first day. So they sign an offer in the fall. What can they expect from our team to hear from to ensure that they are staying engaged, excited about joining our company, but also that they feel as if their anxiety about making this huge life decision, maybe some candidates, it's their first internship, we have their back as an employer. And I guess last thing, which I just think is fun, we do this at Scholars with our team, but I think are extremely successful, is what are some like water cooler starting thought starters that we can have set up for candidates so that they can start to figure out if they have similar interests and hobbies. I mean, some of the funny ones that I like are like, what's your favorite type or form of a potato? Is it a potato chip? Is it a loaded baked potato? What are the coolest places that you've traveled to? What's a hobby that you've picked up over the last month? You would be shocked at how these simple, quirky water cooler type like thought starters drive crazy engagement between candidates because they have something to respond to. And then it breeds some sort of engagement in relationships with people who might have the same likes or interests of them, and goes above and beyond for our brand. With that. And so, I mean, overall, I mean, I just would want to conclude with, it's no surprise that virtual recruiting has changed the early career hiring industry as a whole. Our team is thankful to be a part of it, but I also think that it has truly helped the industry breed collaboration between teams, between peers and leaders in the space, so that we can all do our best to ultimately provide that best candidate experience for the students that we're looking to bring in for internships and or for early career jobs. Some of the main takeaways I hope that people took from this episode are the need to offer flexible work options, the emphasis on a brand that speaks towards the generation of candidates that we're actually hiring to, redefining how we think about our candidate experience strategy at scale as we continue to grow. And I mean, lastly, I would encourage everyone, please follow our Scholars LinkedIn page. You see in the bottom of the video here, we've created a Slack group, which I'm extremely excited to start to build with some of our founding members, where we talk about all things early career engagement and experience. If you want to be featured on one of these LinkedIn Lives, please DM me. I always welcome someone to come on the show so that we can ping off each other. And even if you have just a topic that you want to hear covered about, you might not want to come on the show, but you're like, hey, our team has been thinking about this in our meetings. What have you heard, or what has your team heard, and what are your thoughts? DM me a question. I would love to be able to incorporate that into our next LinkedIn Live as well. And finally, next week's episode, we're going to be covering when candidates are most likely to renege. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm Parker, one of the founders of Scholars, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your week.